Oh, okay. I thought there was something else. Good morning, church. God bless you all. Thanks to Pastor Ryan for inviting me. Now, I'm not a trained minister. I'm just a normal punter like anyone else here. But I appreciate the opportunity that God gives me to share some of the journeys I'm going through with my faith. I'm not standing here because I'm any better than anyone else. I've probably had a week that would be a typical week for anyone in Australia. My wife is not here, so I'll take the liberty to admit some things. There was a couple of fights with my wife this week, like all of you have, right? I'm not a special person here. I've got challenges in my work. I've got 3 daughters, and it's a lot of work for an African man to raise 3 daughters in Australia. It's tough work. So I go through all these things. I won't talk about myself too much more. I'll get straight into it. How are we for time? Are you sure? There's probably a lot to say. The title of our sermon is Cross Culture. Cross Culture. And what we're trying to explore today is 2 angles. Number 1 is, what is the culture of people that follow the cross? So cross culture. People that follow the cross, what do they do? But on the other hand, we also want to tackle this cross or intersection of cultures. So when I look into the audience today, it's quite clear to me that this message is relevant. We've got people from Seychelles, Mauritius, some straight Aussies right from the middle of the Nullarbor Desert. We've got everyone here, right? How do we behave? What's expected of us to behave when we come together? And you'll find that if we go through this correctly, when we get to the end of this session this morning, these things overlap. The fact of how people who follow the cross behave and how people behave when they are put in a group with people that have different perspectives from them, it's actually the same principle. And that's what we want to capture today. If you get tired and sleepy, if it gets boring, the key thing is that cross culture is about the identity we accumulate. It's about who we think of ourselves as being and what other people think of us as being. That's really what we're trying to tackle this morning. Honestly, from this point, if you want to sleep, you can sleep. You can wait for lunch. It's okay. I find it very important to get you into my mind so that you understand as I'm going through this where I'm coming from. Some people are of a vintage where they just saw that and they remembered what it was about. What I want to point to right now is there was a little song they would sing with this. It would say, making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. Getting away from all your worries sure could help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You wanna be where you can see our worries are all the same. You wanna be where everybody knows your name. And I'd like to challenge everybody here. In as much as that song was just about that jingle, the principles of it talk about a cross culture. A cross culture is about creating an environment at this church that everyone who comes here feels like they belong. Creating a space where everybody knows each other and we're all comfortable with each other. And when everybody else from outside looks inside, they're going, wow, I want to be a part of that. What is that? This is what it is when we're actually truly living cross-culture. Now, there are 3 things that I think if these things don't resonate, the sermon won't resonate. And the 3 things are, I think there are 3 undeniable truths here. We are living in difficult times. Now, I know every generation says that. My old man said that, his old man said that, but geez, we're going through some tough stuff, aren't we? There's some really big challenging things. Politically, socially, economically, spiritually. Trump is back. These are the times we're living in. I'm not saying I like him or I don't like him. I don't have to vote for him. But I'm just saying he's back. All right? That's what's happening. We've got the whole thing happening in Russia. We've got the whole thing happening in Palestine. A lot of people here are from Africa. We know what's happening in Africa. There have been droughts. There are still wars. There's still fighting. There's corruption. Can see some friends here, maybe from India or Sri Lanka. We know what's happening in those countries. There's a lot of difficulty in the times we're living in. In fact, the sad thing is, for the longest time, I haven't heard of a place or a country where you can go, geez, wow, that place, that's a cool place. I mean, some of us here who are migrants, at some point in time, Australia was that place, right? Where you go, they told me about Australia. Man, we've got to go there. And when we go there, everything is going to be okay. That's what they've told me. But we're here now and we're like, nah, this is not what I signed up for. This is getting hard. It's expensive. It's challenging. I cannot find jobs. I cannot buy a house. It's hard to buy a car. It's hard to raise kids. It's not what we thought. Socially, things are difficult. I don't know about you, but I'm losing friends. I say things and I offend friends. I don't say things and I offend friends because I didn't say something. I go to one place, I offend someone because I went. I don't go to another place, I offend someone because I did not go. It's so difficult. We're so different. It's so hard to keep tolerating difference. It's so difficult. Socially, things are hard. Economically, things are hard. I would imagine many of us here are mortgage holders. We know what's going on. We never used to worry about that first Tuesday of the month, but now we do. We are all tuning in. We want to know what's going on. What are they going to say? Some of us are probably living in an environment at work where every time the bosses, the leaders have a meeting, you're concerned what emails are going to come out after that. Because you never know. It could be the last. There are many people that are casual that are not getting shifts. There's so much going on. And let's not get started with spiritual. There's so much stuff going on spiritually. There are things that when I was a young man, I probably denied it was possible that those things could happen. For example, I'm from Zimbabwe. I grew up as an Adventist thinking, witchcraft is fake. They just talk about it. Doesn't happen. It's in the minds of the people that think witchcraft is true. But I'll tell you what, in the last 3 or 4 years, I'm like, whoa, this witchcraft thing could actually be a thing. I mean, thank God, I praise a God who's more powerful than it. But geez, this stuff is kind of there. I'm hearing about all sorts of different spiritual stuff. I've got friends from Zimbabwe here. My mother sends me these messages and she's telling me about, if you open this text message, there's some stuff that I'm like, whoa, mom, just relax. It's technology. But there's stuff out there spiritually. It's so confusing to be living in the times that we're living in. And one thing that I find, point number 2 there, is sentiment and opinions are polarizing. You're either Labour or you're Liberal. You're either this or you're that. And the people in the middle end up not being anything. We've got 2 extremes. And then everybody else in the middle is just wondering, well, do I belong there? Do I belong here? I belong there on some things. I belong here on some things. Where? And then this results in a lack of personal identity. And this is the thing I'm really concerned about. Point number 3 there, individualism drives self-preservation. Most people are only trying to look after themselves. Their mental health, their physical health, their social health, their financial health. And they end up saying, doing, thinking, being things only because they just want to survive. Does this make sense, where I'm coming from? Can you relate with this? This is the life that I'm supposing that we're living through. I'd like you to ask some questions and maybe get you to participate a bit here. When you think about it, so I'm Australian, but I'm African. I'm a father. I'm an uncle, I'm a cousin, I'm a friend, I'm a workmate, I'm a boss, I am many things. But when I think about it, what community do I identify with? If someone had to say one, just name one community which you belong to, what would you say? I would be interested in your views. I would like you to participate as well. What do you think? What would you say? If someone says, which community do you belong? I used to worry about this question when I was still new in Australia. And I think Brother Barry asked me as well to say where I'm from. And I'm thinking, am I talking about Craigieburn, where I live? Am I talking about Zimbabwe, where I grew up? So again, that's the question, right? Who do you identify with? Any response? Yes, brother. You identify as a Christian. I like that. I like that. I'll get the pastor to talk to me. He didn't identify as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. You've got some work to do, pastor. You need to get him over the line. No, I'm joking. I get your point. You identify as a Christian. What about others? Is that the first thing that comes to mind? If randomly you were asked, which community do you belong to, or who do you identify with? What would you say? You can talk. Hey, I'm interested. I'm just wondering. What would you... Your neighborhood, your community. So you'd say, I'm from such and such community. That's what I identify with. And I get that. Place. Place gives meaning to it. Yeah, I'm a minister. Does anyone ever think you're probably working for Daniel Andrews or something when you say that? He makes spaghetti. As pastor, yeah, I'm a pastor who makes spaghetti. I think my kids are in that group of people. Where do you belong to? We can move from this, but honestly, if you don't have a view on that, the sermon is going to not find a place in your heart or in your mind. You really have to think about, what do you identify with? Do you identify with where you grew up? Do you identify with where you live now? Do you identify with what you do? Do you identify with the group of beliefs that you have? Whatever it is, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer. All I'm saying is, have a good think about that identity. Because that identity comes with values, norms, beliefs, practices. That if you're not following that, then you're truly not identifying with that group. There's a certain theory that goes around identity that says, do an audit of the time you spend. If you think about your week, you think about your year, which activities took the most time? And when you classify that thing that takes most of your time, what does that plug into as an identity? And I guess, like Pastor Ryan said, which is probably why many people, our work becomes how we identify ourselves, because we spend a lot of time at work. Some people will identify themselves as Collingwood supporters, because that's what they do. They wear the black and white, they go to the footy, they watch the footy. But whatever it is that you spend your time doing, I would like to suggest that's closer to the real thing that you identify with. Right? What are some of the challenges that you are facing in those communities that you belong to? It could be your family, could be your local community, could be your work, it could be your nationality. What are some of the challenges that you are facing within that group? Do these challenges make it easier or harder to experience connection in those communities? I want to ask a confronting question, and I want you to stay with me here. Would you say in your life you have genuine connection with someone or something? Would you say that? Would you say that? You can nod, you can shake your head. Would you say you have genuine connection either with someone or some people, or maybe it could even be an object, something? Because connection is important. And a lack of connection is a very challenging thing to be dealing with, particularly in the times that we're going through. So I'm trying to get us to think about who we identify with. What are some of the challenges we are having in that space that we identify with? And most importantly, what can be done to at least draw connection out of that thing that we identify with? Because if we're spending a lot of time in that space, place, or in that thing with those people, having a connection to that is a very important thing. There's an Aboriginal teaching that I learned, and it brings three things together. It states that for you to belong, for you to identify with something, there are three things. One, there's a place, a physical place, a location that you belong to. Those of us that are from Africa, this really resonates, right? We believe in the land, and I think it coincides with Aboriginal teaching. So where I'm from, it's the land that has belonged to all the lineages in my family. There's a piece of land there. For hundreds of years, we've done our farming, we've lived there, we've done everything. I identify with that. But, side note, I kind of don't now. Right? I've been living here for 24 years. I haven't actually been in that space, in that place for a very long time. So it gets hard for me. So I've got two young kids there in there with my aunt. They were born here. I'm of African heritage. My wife is Fiji Indian. And I always have this challenge when my kids say to me, Dad, who am I? Where do I belong? And is she African? Is she Fijian? Is she Australian? And I don't know about out here in Pakenham. My daughters go to daycare in Port Melbourne. There are some very open-minded, maybe nasty kids that really express to my daughter, she's only 4 years old, but they'll let her know that she doesn't belong. Imagine that. At 4 years old, she's having to deal with the challenges of identity because her dad is half African and her mom is half Indian. And she can't explain that to her colleagues at school. And then when she's different, they just push her out. So place. What place do you belong to? And the second thing they talk about is a people. There has to be a people where you belong to. Where do you come from? Is it your lineage? Is it the place where you live? Is it your beliefs that draw you onto this? But you've got to be, and then the third thing is you actually bring those two things together. There are rules that govern people in a particular place that they belong to together. And this is Aboriginal teaching. If those three things don't come together, you are lacking identity. You've got to have a place that you belong to, you've got to have a people that you belong to, and there has to be a set of rules or ethics that govern how people live in that place that they belong to. And I wonder about this when it comes to our spirituality. Where is the spiritual place that we belong to? Who are the spiritual people that we belong to? And what are the rules that bring together this spiritual place with the spiritual people that we identify with? And these are some of the things we want to tackle today. The answers are in John chapter 13, from 31 to 35. I'll ask someone to read. I'm sorry but look, Pastor Ryan knows how I go about it. I have a presumption that there's nothing new I'm going to teach out of this verse. All I'm trying to do is to stimulate perspective and thoughts so that you can go home and really digest and think about it. I can't teach you anything new. This stuff is there already. It's a verse that there's a context I'll try and put into it, but these are usual things. So sometimes, please don't fault me for not reading through verse by verse by verse by verse. I presume these verses are available to you. You've read them, and I just want to work through how I can engage you to connect with the verse. So if whoever is willing, can read for us John 13, 31 to 35. 34, 35 are the key ones, but the context of 31, 32, 33 is important. It's also my way of giving you a break from my annoying voice, is to get someone else to read. Anyone to read for us, please? John 13, 31 to 35. Anyone can read. Anyone. You don't have your glasses? All right, we'll go with the annoying voice that we've been forced to listen to. Thank you. Yes.
I will be with you only a little longer. And as I told the Jewish leaders, you will search for me, but you can't come where I am going. So now I am giving you a new commandment. Love each other, just as I have loved you. You should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples.
So, verse 31, 32, the context is Jesus is with his disciples. Judas has just left to go and do what he needs to do, what must be done. So we know the kind of timeline. It's crunch time for Jesus, right? These disciples have identified with Jesus all this time. Like some, their names were not known, but they were known to be the dudes that move around with Jesus. And they loved it, right? And then he's now talking in verse 32 about the glory of God being put onto him. And the disciples are like, it's our time. We are going to shine. We've been moving around with this guy, and it's just about to happen. We are just about to ascend to the heavens, and we're right next to him. We're here with him. Then in 33, he goes, oh, hang on, boys. Where I'm going, you can't go with me. What? We've gone everywhere with you. People know us for going everywhere with you. And now that it's crunch time, the glory is about to come, we're about to win the grand final, you're now saying we can't go with you? Then it says, but 34, this is what you've got to do. If you still want to have that championship identity, well, you've got to love one another. And when you love one another, people will know that you're World Cup winners. People will know that you're gold medalists. People will know that you're my followers if you love one another. In other words, all this stuff we've been doing together, going around doing stuff, it has all been about teaching you guys to love each other when I'm gone. What I am suggesting here, friends, is love for one another. This is the thing that should give you connection in whatever it is you identify with. It's love for one another. It's this identity of Christ, like our brother said. If we are going to identify as Christians, then the one thing that must happen is we must love one another. So much so that the world will look at us and go, hang on, this is not normal stuff. And I like it. And I want it. And I'm going to have courage to go and ask what those guys are doing at Lake Boulevard that makes them so connected. Because I want that. That is how they'll know. That is how they'll know. I'll presume you have these church board meetings where you're arguing about putting a bigger banner by the waterfront so that people can see the sign that there's the church. It's not that, friends. It's by loving one another when we're out there in community, when we visit each other's homes and our kids are playing together and we meet at Aldi and we let other people go in front of us in the line and we're paying for other people's groceries. Then they're like, what is with these guys? What is it with them? Yeah, they meet by the lake, but what is it about these people and what they do midweek and all this other stuff? I want some of that. That is the best banner we need to have. Now, how can we get there? I know this is difficult. I know this is challenging. How can we get there? I've got a few things that I would like to share with you. When I was growing up in Africa, there were 3 things that we were always told were sacred, right? It was the Sabbath, it was tithe, and it was marriage. And Sabbath is a time that is set aside for rest. Sabbath is a time that is sacred because it is put aside so that we can disconnect from all the other stuff that happens. That failure to disconnect from the world will make us be of the world and in the world. If you are ever asking yourself how it could be possible that you can be in the world but not of the world, it's this thing that God gave us, the Sabbath, to disconnect. Tithe is a sacrifice that recognizes divine providence. When you tithe, you are demonstrating that you know that everything belongs to God. It's not, we're not building up a superannuation fund for God. It's not an industry super fund for God when we give him 10%. We are just recognizing that everything belongs to him anyway. Marriage is a symbol of commitment to our relationships. And relationships are important. Difficult as they are, relationships are very, very important. I'll drill into a couple of things. My wife is Fiji Indian. She's not native Fijian, but she's Fiji Indian. But I learned something about the Fijians when it comes to Sabbath. Now, most of them will observe Sabbath on Sunday in the native traditional Fiji culture. And they have a thing in Fijian culture that they call Singatambu. Singatambu in Fiji is on a Sunday. The community comes together. They'll find a tree. They will sit in the shade quietly. No one talks. They just sit there as a community quietly. And the teaching or the belief is, if we can sit in one place together, we will become one. It's not talking. It's not, hey, these are my worries, this is my issue. It's just sitting and being next to each other. And in doing that, they become one. And I thought, wow, isn't this what we do every Sabbath? Isn't this what you're doing now? We are seated there next to each other quietly. Yes, howbeit listening to some guy talking, but we sit here quietly for a long time. And when this is done right, we are actually more connected with one another when we leave. And I like that teaching. We don't have to talk to connect, but sometimes just being in the same place, in the same space, is an important thing. And we get that every Sabbath. Every Sabbath, we get to be here in the same place, in the same space. I'll leave you with that teaching. That teaching of being in the same space with someone is very important for connection. The next one. It's interesting that when European explorers, when they arrived in New Zealand, they found a culture where the wealth was measured by how much you give, not how much you have. I'll say that again, right? Imagine this. There was a Maori culture where to be the richest guy, it was because you had given away the most. Not because you have it and you're keeping it. It's because you had given away the most. Now, when European explorers first got there, they struggled to break the bond of those communities. And when they were given advice, they were told, listen, teach the native New Zealanders greed. If you teach them to be greedy, you will break their connection and their bond. They will now start measuring things by how much each one has rather than how much each one gives. And I found that very interesting. What we are saying about the sacredness of the love behind our wealth and our time is it's only more valuable when we give it away than when we keep it. $1 in your pocket is worth more than $1 if you give it to someone. That's the teaching here. The other teaching is when we look at tithe, there's a big struggle for many of us to return that 10%. But let's change the thinking. If 100% belongs to God, you are being allowed to deal with 90. What I'm trying to say is, if you manage the 90% with God, the 10% is going to be easy. But the thing that we do is, we presume that the other 90 belongs to us. So we want to do what we want to do with the 90. And then it becomes 91, 92, 93, because we want to do what we want to do. But if you actually recognize that how you manage the 90, you are just managing it for God, the 10% is so much easier. So I'd like to challenge you around your resources. I know money is a key resource, but I'll tell you what, one of the things I've learned in life, money is actually the cheapest resource. It's so easy. It's a piece of paper. It's your time, your talent, your effort, your intent, your genuine grant. That is way more valuable than money, by far. So it's that part of it. How do you manage your passion? How do you manage your time? How do you manage your effort? Your effort, when you are doing something and you're putting into it, how do you manage that? Do you manage that for God or not for God? These are the things I'd like you to think about. There are also a couple of teachings on relationships. Like I said, hey, I'm not saying this because I've got the greatest marriage and my wife is on cloud nine. She's so happy. She could probably tell you some stuff about me. But relationships are important. Maori teachings again. Wanangatanga is kinship and relationship. Love and connection are strengthened by individuals prioritizing the collective well-being over individual desires. Whatever group that you said you belong to, if you want to establish connection in that group, it's all about you prioritizing the other members of that group over yourself. This works even at home. I'm not good at it. I'm terrible. But if I wanted to have a good relationship at home with my wife, I have to prioritize her over myself. Now, I'm not here for marriage counseling, right? But it's an important part of our lives. The interesting thing is when that principle is not reciprocated, you have a break. If you have one person who prioritizes others' needs over their own, but there's no other person who's prioritizing that person's needs over their own, we have an imbalance. And this is why communication and connection in relationship are important. Because if we're not going together, someone's going to tip over. But the teaching here, the teaching as individuals, you have to be willing to put in for the other person over yourself. That's just the way it is. And sometimes we don't know what they're going to do. And this is where we probably need to talk. We need to put our expectations on the table. We need to convince whatever we do. But your responsibility is to put in more for others than yourself. Aroha. Love is not just a feeling, but it's an action in due season with due seasoning to establish genuine companionship. And my wife says this a lot to me. You know, whenever I've done something silly, I say, but babe, I love you. She's like, hey, dude, that's okay. You can say it, but you're not doing it. I want to see it. I don't want to hear it, Taff. I want to see it. But I said it, babe. No. No one's listening, Taff. You got to do it. I think that's fair. That's fair. It's true. Love is an action. It's got to be done. And when it's not done, then it's not done. It's not there. It has to be done. Number 3, manakatanga is hospitality and care. I won't spend too much time on this because obviously as I was walking in, I saw food, right? So we're getting this part, right? Showing hospitality and generosity to community and strangers fosters love and connection. And strangers. It's not enough for us to feed one another as friends. It's when as friends we can invite a stranger to come and sit and eat with us. That's something. That is doing stuff. And I tell you what, there was a time I was very convicted about the food ministry. And I would go and invite my neighbors one by one to come home, bring their meal, I'll bring my meal, come. And sometimes I would have friends from church and they would come and it would give me courage to pray for the food and do all this sort of stuff. And the neighbors were like, hey, that was a really good session we had with your friends. You know, you've got some really nice people around you. It just helped me with my ministry with my neighbors. Well, not in the new place that I'm living in now. Those neighbors are a bit hard for me, but I'm talking about my past. It was a good ministry. Food, hospitality is a wonderful ministry. First, when we do it to one another, but when we do it to one another, just tag someone in. It doesn't matter. Random dude at Aldi. Hey, give me your address. I'll cook you this thing. You've seen me buying it. Come to my house. I'll cook it for you. I know it's hard because communities are not safe and stuff. But guys, This is the risk that we've got to take. Nobody said our faith in Christ was a safe zone. Nobody said that. We've got to take a chance to get this love out there, because loving one another by ourselves is good, but it's not enough. In Acts chapter 11, verse 20 to 30, I won't read it, but the crux of the matter there is we are shown a church that began with Jews. The Greeks came in. They went to other places. In other words, Acts chapter 11, 20 to 30 is trying to say it is possible. It's possible for people from different backgrounds, different places to actually love one another and have genuine connection. It's possible. And it's possible that when that is done well, other people join in. I mean, this is how the gospel came to Africa, right? The Ethiopian. And he went and he got there, he got baptized, and then he came back to Africa in true African style. He was telling everybody about what he found in Jerusalem. All the way from Ethiopia, up at the top of Africa. I'm from Zimbabwe, there's some guys here from South Africa. The gospel came because he saw some good stuff, and he kept telling everybody else. So it's possible. It's possible that when we act in love, and we love one another, and we bring other people into that community of love, it is possible. It is very possible that everything works out. It's possible. I'll give you some other ideas. 3 habits of cross-culture. Number 1 is contact. I've been talking about this a lot. Contact. Guys, you got to do something. You've got to make contact with someone. You've got to call someone. You've got to say hello to someone. You've got to go to someone's house. You've got to meet someone at La Paqueta. Something has to happen. There's no way we can do this love thing when we're seated at our home, reading Steps to Christ, watching Doug Batchelor. I mean, it's a great combination, but it's not going to cut it. We have to make contact. We have to be seeking to be involved in engaging connective activity. Okay, so we meet at La Paqueta. We meet at a pub. What is it that we are doing when we are there? How does it promote connection? If we can spend most of our time doing activities that foster connection, how can I get to understand this person better? How can I get to share with this person more who I really am? These are the things we need to be spending our time in. We have to be driven by purpose and intent. There was one time I have a lot of convictions in my life. There was one time I was convicted to do don't laugh, a pub ministry. Pub ministry. And this is going to pubs. I'll drink my lemonade, but I'm in a pub, drinking my lemonade, talking to people about life. And if I get an opportunity to talk about God, I will. I'll tell you what, that ministry never disappointed. Never, ever disappointed. Whenever I found myself in that situation, there would be someone who just needed a chat. Without fail, there would always be someone who'd be sent my way who just needed that yarn from someone sober. I had to stop that ministry, though. It had bad perceptions. But I'm just saying, sometimes what we really, really need is purpose and intent. Why are you there? What are you trying to do when you are there? And if you're clear about that, sometimes the format or form doesn't matter. So, contact, connective activities, purpose and intent. I'll give you some other ideas. These are just ideas. Domestic cross-culture. How many meals did you share with your family this week? There are possibly at least 21 meals a week. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. 7 days a week. 3 times 7. How many do you reckon you shared with your family? I think it's important, guys. I think it's important. There's something about a family having a meal together. And I know we're busy, shift work, etc. That's cool. But let's have purpose and intent around at least having that dedicated time when we sit down as a family and have a meal. There's something special about it. And trust me, I believe in the Fijians. Even if we had this meal and everyone was quiet, just sitting there together, having the same meal at the same place at the same time, there's power of unity that comes out of that. I'd like to challenge you and encourage you to be intentional about having more meals with your family. How many times did you have family worship? There are probably 21 forms of worship you can have with your family. Morning, afternoon, night. 7 days a week. How many times did you pray as a family? How many times did you sing a song as a family? How many times did you open a Bible verse as a family? How many times did you just have a little bit of a yarn around testimonies about things that are happening in your life? It's difficult. We have shift work. The kids are playing their games. The kids have their friends. But this is important. If we are going to identify as a family unit that has love of Christ binding us together, some of this stuff has got to be happening. Some of it. How many of your 4 neighbors know you by name? How many of your 4 neighbors know you're a Christian? How many of your 4 neighbors know you're a Seventh-day Adventist? How many of your 4 neighbors know you're here right now? There's something interesting I learned about the Church of Latter-day Saints. When in the Church of and I'm not promoting them, right? But it's a point. When you're being selected to be an elder in the Church of Latter-day Saints, before they accept your nomination, they literally send people to your house, and the 4 cardinals of your house, your neighbors, if those people cannot testify that you are a Latter-day Saints Christian, you're off. It's harsh. It's harsh. It's harsh. But geez, fair, isn't it? Fair. You can't come here and be an elder when the guy who lives opposite you every day has no idea what you're doing here. How could you possibly do that? So it's harsh. It's very human eye judging. I get that. But just the principle is what I think I'm okay with. And the principle is somebody's got to know. Somebody's got to know. Particularly these guys that live around us. They've got to at least have an idea. Some sort of an idea what we're on about. And it'll be a good thing. A few other hints. I'm getting close to the end, so don't stress. How many times did you have Bible study this week? Individual, so not family. You. So even me. I only picked up the Bible this week because I had to prepare for the sermon. Honestly, had it not been for that, work was crazy this week. It was nuts. The kids were nuts. Everything's going on. But intentional Bible study. If I don't do that, what am I expecting to happen? If I don't feed, what do I expect to happen? And I mean, God is kind enough. When I've been in a bind, a sticky situation, haven't been praying for weeks, tight with money, fighting with the wife, I kneel down, I pray, he comes through. Like, seriously, you're lucky I'm not God. If I was, I would have a ledger and I'd be like, nah, I'm not answering your prayer this time. Go home and pray 256 times and then come back or something. I would come up with a formula. But he still takes us in. That's the goodness of his grace. But the intent, guys, has got to be there from our end. How much time did you spend in prayer this week? Like I said, I'm not perfect, guys. I've actually got issues. I'm actually at a funny phase of my Christianity where I'm actually getting a bit agitated when, some people start doing the 5, 6, 7, 10-minute prayer. I'm like, come on, dude, we want to go for lunch, right? I need to check my Instagram, finish up with this prayer already. I'm struggling to spend time in prayer. I used to enjoy spending time in prayer, genuine prayer, and it could go for hours. I'm struggling, guys. I'm just being honest. I'm not promoting my behavior, but I don't want to stand here and be a hypocrite. This is a point that I'm preaching to myself too. I need to be intentional about the time I spend in prayer. If I don't, my faith will grow weak. It's just natural. It is just natural. The less time we spend in prayer and in Bible study and in service, the most natural thing is our faith's just going the other way. Naturally. It just happens. How much time did you spend in service? I was hearing about the food and all of that. It's good to have a routine in our week where it could be 5, 10, 20 minutes, 30. Just doing something for someone else other than you. And yes, you've got deadlines. Yes, you've got to mow the lawn. Yes, you've got to do the gutters. That stuff will always be there. We can't wait till our gutters are crisp clean before we're helping and serving other people, because it's never going to happen. We just need to be intentional about service to others. How many times did you have a Bible study? I think I looped here. The purpose of cross-culture, the purpose of us having an identity is so that we can share that identity with others. Right? I'm going to say something that's a little bit bold, a little bit strong, but I think I'm coming from somewhere. The difficulty with the Jewish faith is that it is so enclosed. It's not welcoming of others. And even when Christ walked the earth, that was the difficulty they had with him. They were just not willing for all those blessings to go to others. But that is the point of identifying with Christ. His whole thing is about it going to others. Summary: we belong to Christ. We should hold on to our Christian faith as our core identity. To do that, the Bible has taught us we have to love one another. At an individual level, that love means giving more to others, most likely than you're going to get back. But you have to keep doing it. And you have to keep doing it again. And when we can do it within our family, within our friendship groups, within our church, the goal from there is let's bring others into that love. Let's bring others into that connection. Let's bring others into that place and that space so that they too can experience the love. Any questions? I know it's unusual to ask questions at the end, but any questions? Did I say anything that didn't make sense? Probably a lot, but is there anything that you think even I should correct myself before I leave? I hope it's been helpful. I hope there's some things you got out of that. When you get to that place where you have genuine companionship and genuine connection with the people around you that you identify with, I'll tell you what, it's a wonderful place to be when you're in that space. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to be. God bless you, and I pray that you get to that place.